Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Bowling. I'll be facilitating today. I want to welcome everybody to our June 2025 Regional Housing Forum. Again, thanks for fighting the traffic and getting here almost on time. And thank the folks that are online. We have 100 or so folks that are beaming in. After COVID, some of those folks never came back. They just found it's better to do it in their pajamas, but I think we have a good turnout today. Today we're focusing on how do we leverage big events and development, big development in the city. We know that very well. Let me ask just all you young people in the room, how many people were here for the 1996 Olympics? Oh my gosh, y'all weren't so young. I mean, maybe you were in middle school back then. But that's kind of our North Star, how we organized and the things that we got, particularly in housing. So we have some new opportunities that are coming up. Let me just ask before we begin the program, are there any announcements over the next couple of months? Big meetings coming up or things that you want people to know? Right back here. And just tell us who you are.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Patnod with Reinvestment Fund. I'm also a board member of the Atlanta Women's Affordable Housing Network. I wanted to let everybody know about our upcoming Drag Queen Bingo on June 26th. It is a fundraiser happy hour. All the proceeds benefit the Trans Housing Coalition, which is based here in Atlanta. You can find tickets at atlantawan.org.
Thank you.
Bill, I've got an announcement too. ANDP is a part of the National NeighborWorks Network, and every June is NeighborWorks Week. There's a flyer out front about an event coming up, so check that out.
Right here.
Good morning, Yolanda Johnson with the City of East Point, Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Empowerment. We have a Community Resource Day coming up June 13th. That's on a Friday from 10 to 2. If you're interested in becoming a vendor, please reach out to me.
East Point, show up. Doing good things down there. Right over here, George.
Anytime I get a chance to speak, right? I'm with the Atlanta Black Chamber. My name is Matthew Coleman. I'm the CEO of VI Capital Lending. I'm the committee chair for the Real Estate and Professional Service Committee. We're going to have a Feed the Homeless on August 20th. We'll be down at the Gateway Center. And then we also have an event, the Sustainable Living, that's going to be on the June 27th. So if you're interested, please contact me after it's over. Thanks.
Good morning, Natalie Kaiser, House ATL. Our next House ATL member convening will be August 14th. We'll be at the Morrow Center in Clayton County. I hope to see many of you there. And we're also preparing for a home expo on September 27th, which will be in DeKalb County. We will be supporting home buyers and people who are existing homeowners who are trying to preserve their homes with resources and workshops and vendors.
Thank you, Natalie. Any other announcements for the good of the cause? All right, why don't we jump right in. This is not so much an announcement, but to say that there are several conversations going on in town. Several of you are involved in those conversations. One is around the new tree ordinance. We got close, and then we're still in conversation. So that's been a 2 or 3 year conversation that's been going on, but particularly as it's relevant to housing and affordable housing, and how that does not penalize us who are working on that issue. Also, a conversation in town about the Housing Trust Fund and how some of those funds are being used. Again, nothing illegal there. It's just some disappointment about moving money around and so forth. We're not going to address those today, but I would direct you to pay attention to those conversations. And if there's anybody in the room that are involved in that, let folks know. They may ask you about it. So you've likely heard about development shaping downtown. Centennial Yards, probably the biggest development we've ever had, a $6 billion development in the old gulch. You know, I've been here since the mid-'70s looking at that gulch and wondering if it would ever get developed, but they're well on their way. The Stitch, which is really across the street from this church, which is an effort to connect neighborhoods that got disconnected with the highway and the way we've developed the city. South Downtown, there's new owners, new developers, a new vision there about South Downtown, and we're in conversation with those folks. We also have the 2026 FIFA World Cup. I think we have 6 or 8 games that are going to be here. That means people from all over the world coming to this city. We always try to put our best face on that and try to organize around how do we invite our guests to the city and show them the best side of Atlanta. The NCAA Final Four will come here. The 2028 Super Bowl will be here. The All-Star Game will be here this year in July. So Atlanta really is that place that hosts the world. And I think anytime those kind of developments are happening, those kind of events, we always look for those who live here. How do we leverage those? And in our case, how is it going to affect our efforts to develop affordable housing? Not only in the city and around the city, but in the whole region, because it does affect the whole region. I already asked you about who was here for the Olympics, and I was, we could just kind of go around and everybody tell their story about that. I know when I was at the food bank, and Rob Johnson is here, who was a COO, we worked 24 hours a day for 3 weeks and collected over 500,000 pounds of food. The only Olympics that's ever done that. But there's 1,000 stories about how this city stepped up to that. We're going to hear from leaders from Metro Atlanta Chamber and Central Atlanta Progress as they share their vision for downtown and how they believe they can make the most of this unique opportunity. But we're going to start out with a panel. That'll be a little fireside chat over here. But we're going to start out with a panel really talking about how we serve the public interest. So let me ask the panelists. Atlanta City Council Member Jason Dozier. Is Jason here? There you are. Come on up. Sherman Golden from Thompson & Hyde Law Firm. Sherman. And our own Catherine Vessel, who I have her here about every third meeting, I think, Catherine, but thanks for being here again. I just want to take a moment as we were planning this forum and trying to, where's Jason? He was on the West Coast at some kind of meeting in a hotel, and that's where we found him. I know he's going to D.C., I think, this weekend. So let me thank you for your public service. Thank you as a veteran, and thank you for the work that you do around that. So a sincere thank you, Jason. Not an easy job, and I know one of my questions is how do you get input from the community? And the community can sometimes show up mad or have expectations you can't reach. And so it's a tough job, any of us that are out in the community listening to the community. We'll begin. Where's my questions? Catherine, I'm going to kind of have you jump in first, really because just a few days ago we had our latest 2025 point-in-time count of the unhoused. Made the front page of the paper, I think, which is a nice placement. What'd that count tell us this year, Catherine?
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everybody. Is this on? Oh, yeah. So 2025's count, and just as a reminder, zooming out, this is an annual count that we do that's required by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, where we go out, send over 200 volunteers out throughout every neighborhood in the city of Atlanta proper, and survey people who are experiencing homelessness. We then go out day shifts throughout the rest of that week and survey at area service locations, soup kitchens, places where we know unsheltered people who we might have missed on the night of the count are coming in for services and resources and survey there. We then combine all of that with homeless management information system data around collecting who was sleeping in shelter and transitional housing on the night of the
Catherine, hold
count.
the mic as close as we can.
So all of that is combined and tabulated and gives us the result for that night's count. So this year, we were at a total of 2,894 people experiencing homelessness on the night of the count, which was January 27th. That's a 1% increase from last year overall. We saw a 2% uptick in the number of people who were unsheltered. So we look by unsheltered homelessness, sheltered homelessness, and then we look at subpopulations like youth, families, veterans, and chronic homelessness. We're pleased to report that our chronic numbers are down. This is the population that we view as the most vulnerable in our system. By definition, it's somebody with a permanent impairment or disability, mental health, addiction, medical, and long lengths of stay in homeless, more than a year, or multiple episodes in the last several years. So these are people that, but for our assistance, are going to be stuck in our system. So we did see a reduction in the number of people who are chronically homeless, and we believe that's a result of our targeted and dedicated investments into permanent supportive housing and growth of housing and exits of people who are chronically homeless.
You know, you really sat in the middle of a lot of different activities. I know we're anticipating budget cuts that are going to directly affect this. Are there more coordinating meetings? Who are you working with now? Certainly around our topic today, but as we say, okay, it's a new environment, maybe we don't have as many resources. Talk about the work you do in collaboration and coordination.
Sure. I think collaboration and coordination is really sort of the bread and butter of what we're focused on, and we usually describe our work in two key buckets. One is working and coordinating, aligning with the service providers. So to clarify, Partners for Home does not do direct service with people experiencing homelessness. We are the coordinating entity. So we work alongside all of our service providers, soup to nuts, whether it's shelters, outreach providers, to permanent housing providers, and everything in between, to coordinate and align that work. We do that through work groups and committees to drive different segments of the work. We have a veterans committee, for example. We have an outreach committee. And then the other big component of what we do is leveraging and aligning resources. So virtually any dollar or resource that could support homelessness, whether it's at the Department of Family and Children's Services, or at the Department of Behavioral Health, or at the Department of Community Affairs, or at the mayor's office, or through HUD, or from the private sector, whether it's private philanthropy, the corporate sector, and other private partners, our housing authority, our county. So our job is to go to all of these different respective entities and say, what resources and services can you bring to bear to align and leverage against our strategy, which is scaling housing to exit people out of homelessness as quickly as possible?
Is there any new people at the table?
Yeah, as it relates to this, big party we're having next year with a soccer ball, we have been coordinating some key downtown partners since late November of last year, including Georgia State, who's been actively at the table, which we're really thrilled about, Central Atlanta Progress, and AJ and his team have been a key partner, Atlanta Downtown Improvement District, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, many of our providers across downtown, including Safe House, Gateway, Hope Atlanta, among others. So we are bringing people to the table in a new way to think about how do we strategically target unsheltered homelessness in the downtown area and get folks who are sleeping downtown into housing. Our goal is to rehouse 400 street sleepers by the end of this year and to eliminate street homelessness in downtown specifically by the World Cup.
So we have the Chamber and Central Atlanta Progress here. Any message you want to deliver to them, Catherine, before I bring them up here for a fireside chat?
Yes, we have a $52 million fundraising cap. In all seriousness, they've been incredible partners and really helping us to align and leverage partners that we've never brought to the table. In the last few months, we've met with the Aquarium, we've met with the World Congress Center, we've met with the Atlanta Center Visitors Center for, what is it, the Visitors Bureau? ACBB, thank you. Among many others. So, next up is the Hawks and the Falcons, and we've met with CIM, and we have met with South Downtown has been actively a part of these meetings as well. We've met with the hotel, the Downtown Hotel and Lodging Association. So we are literally sitting down and talking with anybody and everybody who touches downtown and has an interest in downtown and inviting them to the table to participate, whether that's, asking the hotels, can we use your bathrooms for our outreach workers, or a place for them to take their lunch breaks, or, can we get investment year over year? Because this isn't just about the World Cup, I want to be clear. We want to leverage this moment to propel us to be able to see these numbers decline now that we've stabilized, and create a sustainable system that continues to invest in people experiencing homelessness year over year, well beyond the World Cup.
Yeah. And, that really brings up, we've got to sit down, we've got to talk, do things together to build trust. Do you feel like we're making progress in that way?
Absolutely, I think so. I think people are really excited and energized by the plan that we've put together. And
give me an example of maybe a new conversation or conversations you haven't had, say, with visitors and travel, or with, I know you talk to CAP and they have a staff person working there, but I guess the question is, how do we not just leverage the event, but how do we make lasting change? Can we put things in place that after all those folks go home, we have built trust, new relationships, new partnerships?
yeah, I'll give you
Do you
two.
feel hopeful about that?
I do. Two examples. One is Chris Womack, the CEO of Southern Company, has committed to co-chairing our campaign along with Scott Heron from Cisco and B. Perez from Coca-Cola. And so I think and they're putting investments behind that leadership position as well, to help us launch this work in a new way. And so I think beyond that, we are also looking to see how can we leverage the corporate sector beyond what we've done normally in the past, which is just asking for money. How can we leverage their political support to be able to go to the public sector, our elected officials at the local and state level, to secure dedicated revenue for homelessness ongoing. And then beyond that, in engaging the private sector, our goal, although we're not there yet, is to invite the private sector to invest in a year-over-year way. We're hoping to start that with downtown by getting downtown private sector partners to invest, to pay for street outreach year over year, to pay for housing for people who we know are going to continue to become homeless in our system. And then we want to replicate that. We want to take that to Midtown, we want to take that to Buckhead, and we want to take that to every neighborhood across the city of Atlanta and invite the private sector
And the region.
to invest.
I mean, I live in Decatur. We have plenty of
Absolutely.
homeless people there.
Yeah.
I know I'm putting a lot of questions to you right up front,
Hot here,
but
Bill.
you recently took a trip to San Francisco, Denver, and some other cities. And I know in our conversation, they have created mechanisms for taxing, for devoting resources to this issue. Give us some examples of that, because I think anytime we have to learn from each other, and I know you network with folks around the country.
Yeah. This is my favorite question. San Francisco.
I didn't even tell you I was going to ask it,
I
did
know. Coming on the heels of visiting San Francisco and Denver, San Francisco, aside from a $750 million budget for homelessness from the general fund, has a gross receipt tax on businesses earning more than $50 million. That generated initially in the first couple years $500 million and is continuing to generate dollars specifically for homelessness. They also have a private sector slush fund from Benioff. So the founder of Salesforce has committed ongoing dollars to enable them to be able to use private dollars for the things that public money won't pay for. In Denver, they created a sales tax, a 0.25% sales tax that generates $50 million annually. All of that is committed to homelessness. They also have the Care for Denver sales tax, it's 0.25% that provides funds for mental health for people in Denver. There are many other examples of dedicated revenue around the country. Miami does a sales tax in the city of Miami for family homelessness. Chicago and LA have an Airbnb tax. There are many cities along the West Coast that have property levies. that contribute solely to homelessness. And I think for me, the message is we have to stop treating homelessness as the cute little puppy dog over here that gets a little carve out, a little peel off of a larger fund, the 5%, the 10%. We have to treat it as a standalone issue and fund it accordingly to be able to solve this problem.
You might imagine I'm going to follow that with a question for Jason. Every community has got to figure out its own way of doing that. But I think, Jason, as a city council person, as a person very involved in your own neighborhood and in the community, how do we capture some of the growth? Through taxes, fees, other tools, reinvest in affordable housing. What's the conversation at the council?
Yeah. So I think everyone in the city, from the mayor to city council, all the way through our city staff, are firing on all cylinders, getting ready for World Cup next year. It's permeating every single conversation we have around delivery of transportation infrastructure projects, to stormwater management, to grants and community development, making sure that we're ready for next year. And so as a city as a whole, I think we're thinking a lot about how do we sustain this opportunity so that beyond next summer, we get to reap the benefits of all the investments that we're making today. I think part of that goes beyond some of the big projects that you alluded to earlier, Centennial Yards, South Downtown SoDo.
We're all going to be here after they go away.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
exactly. I'm not gonna say we had a fight, but some colleagues and I had a friendly disagreement with the administration around even the resurfacing plan for downtown Atlanta, trying to make sure that that we make downtown more livable by investing in more pedestrian infrastructure for cyclists, thinking about beyond just World Cup. With that being said, I think part of the value capture that we're trying to ensure happens beyond just these mega projects, making sure that we have a sustained pipeline of housing opportunities that are going to add a net benefit to our downtown communities, regardless of what happens next year. We have Trinity Central Flats, which is right across the street from Atlanta City Hall that nobody talks about. It's 219 units of affordable housing units. We have First United Methodist, which received a significant amount of funding from Invest Atlanta a couple years ago, 320 units of 85% that's going to be affordable. And then I believe, it is tomorrow, we're going to be celebrating 143 Alabama, the old Atlanta Constitution building. That's going to bring almost 200 units of mostly affordable housing units as well. So we have a number of projects in the pipeline that we're moving forward with to try to capture this excitement, this reinvestment in downtown that goes beyond just these events, but it's making sure that we have our blocking and tackling figured out, that we're doing the normal things we should be doing as a city, making sure that downtown is clean, downtown is safe, all these sorts of things that we need to do as a city that will ensure quality of life is where it needs to be, so that when we have these new thousands of residents in our heart of our city, that regardless of what events are here, people can live here and thrive here.
Yeah. I'm going to have AJ up in a few minutes, but the Central Atlanta Progress has been working so hard on this idea of the stitch, which gives us new parkland, but also the opportunity for affordable housing. Is that a conversation that someone from the council is talking to Central Atlanta Progress and the people organizing that?
Yeah, I mean, for full disclosure, I serve on the board of Atlanta Downtown Improvement District, so I get to have these conversations with AJ, with Jack, and other members of their team in those board meetings, in addition to having those conversations at our city council meetings. I used to chair our Community Development and Human Services Committee, and from that, I served on the Invest Atlanta board, so I get to have a lot of these conversations about these same issues in a lot of different rooms, and really advocate for the things that are important to me and to the city in a very unique way. And what I've been very appreciative about with the Stitch and some of these other larger projects is that affordable housing has been a large part of the vision that we've talked about from day one. It's not just about capping the connector. It's not just about getting new park space, but it's to make sure that we have this amazing amenity for people in this city to be able to thrive in a way that they can't do currently because there's no housing there right now. Developers don't see the vision that we see, so we have to make it more apparent to them. But also, when we do have people living there, making sure those amenities are accessible to folks who are living on the margins. And so, affordable housing has been a big part of that vision since day one, and now we're getting close to the execution phase and making sure that we keep that vision permeating through every single aspect of how we implement this project.
And you know why this is so important is that we've had a mayor who has really leaned in to housing like no other mayor's ever done. And he's actually running on it for re-election. But 4 years, 5 years, that mayor will move on to be the president of the United States or something. I'm not sure what he wants to do. But the things that we put in practice by law, and you're still here, Jason, when that mayor moves on, are the things that we're going to keep working on. It's the foundation. It's the policy that we've got to. And I'm going to ask Sherman in just a second about some of those ideas, but it's just so important now to put some of these policies in place and laws in place. Another conversation we briefly had as we were planning was how much a lot of the commercial space is undervalued tax-wise with Fulton County. And I know that's a conversation been going a long time, but bring us up to date on that. Because we're leaving money on the table.
And just to dovetail back to something that Catherine said, I want to make sure the city's getting her the money she needs to be able to have dedicated funding for homelessness. And so we think every single day about opportunities for new revenues to be able to support that. Part of that is lobbying our state legislators to allow us to do more things from a property tax levy standpoint, from a sales tax levy standpoint, to bring more revenues into the city. Part of that is also making sure that they're not being antagonistic towards our efforts to address homelessness in the city of Atlanta. Just a couple years ago, we had state legislation that was going to significantly harm our ability to help people who are out in the streets. And so one of the things that we talked about for some time and the money that we're leaving on the table is that many of our commercial properties across the city are vastly underappraised. It's alarming when you see Class B or Class C office buildings sell for $10 or $20 million, and you look at the appraisal, the Fulton County tax rolls, and suggest that that property is only worth $5 or $6 million. And so there's a huge delta between what it's actually selling for, what the market is saying is worth, versus what our public entities are saying is worth. And so we've had conversations for some time. I've met with several of our county commissioners, and I think our county partners have some of the same concerns that we have as a city. These appraisals don't just hurt the city of Atlanta. It hurts Fulton County. It hurts Atlanta Public Schools. It hurts the city of Roswell. It hurts the city of Alpharetta. And so I think there is some alignment in trying to make sure that we get this right, because we don't want to leave money on the table, because we all have these greater needs to be able to want to support our municipalities. Washington is not there for us in the way that it has been in years prior. So we have to do more to think outside the box to bring more revenues into our cities. And so we did a work session at City Council, as we are often do, where we've had folks from the county appraisal office come tell us how their formulas work and how they do their assessments. We have a new county assessor that I believe started last year, and we're trying to work with him to think about how we can make some modifications to the formula to get closer to the how the market values these properties. But we still have our work cut out for us.
Okay.
And so more conversations are going to happen, but I think now that we're getting to a crunch point where federal dollars drying up, and much of our housing programming is tied to funding that is distributed by HUD. I think you're going to see a lot more conversations on that end to get more revenues.
So what if somebody in the room wanted to be in the room when you and that commissioner had that conversation? Is that possible?
I mean,
I don't know. Somebody here might want to be in the room.
I say, look, as someone who gets yelled at public comment with some regularity, I would say more the merrier. Come to our public meetings. Also, go across the street to talk to your county commissioners as well, because I think they're the
All right,
ones.
there's the message.
They're
Right.
the ones that have a stronger impact on how the county is conducting business. And so as a city, we'll advocate along with our other municipalities across the county, but we need our county commissioners to be a much more active and engaged partner in this conversation as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Sherman, I think this is your first time being on a panel, so I want you to take a moment to introduce yourself. We both have gray beards, so we've been around a while.
Yeah, I've been here a minute.
Sherman told me that if I'd turn to him, he could take care of the next hour and a half of our conversation. So I told him I may have to call him down a little bit, but let me pose a question and then let you run with it, Sherman. Many in the room are aware of the developer Centennial Yards, CIM is what we call it. They committed to 20% of their residential units as affordable. I think we have something on the screen, George. We invited them. Brian McGowan tried to be here. He has a lot of folks coming to town for a meeting today, could not. He sent us this basic fact sheet. We'll have him here at another time. The negotiation when somebody is going to do $6 billion self-financing project, you've got to negotiate with the city about what are the parameters. Could we do 20%? And part of the option they have is to pay their way out of that, like they did in the first project, Mitchell. And there were, I'm told, circumstances that they needed to move on with that. But as we look at projects like that, what kind of changes to policy or incentives might ensure that affordable units actually get built instead of developers paying their way out? So first, I think a lot of people know you, Sherman. You've moved around this community for many years, but say a little bit about your work, and then how could we do this differently?
Sure. So my name is Sherman Golden.
And put the mic close.
My name is Sherman Golden. I'm an attorney here in the city. I've been working here in the city for 40 plus or minus years.
Oh, you started in middle school too, huh?
Yeah.
Started earlier.
I'm actually from here, and I've got neighbors that I grew up with that are also in the audience. I've lived all over this community. Grew up in Southwest, lived in Northwest, lived in Buckhead, lived in Midtown, lived in Fourth Ward. I've lived everywhere. Right. And
Mic close.
And
so we hear.
And been working in the community redevelopment and affordable housing space for most of that 40 plus or minus years. I've represented a lot of governments in that capacity, but most of my representation has been of private developers. So I've gotten to see, from all angles, the issue of affordability. And one of the issues that, we sort of brought here to talk about was this sort of payment in lieu, right, where a developer can buy its way out of building affordable housing.
Kind of like a tree ordinance, huh?
Yeah. And so, and the reality of the situation is, as a community and as a government, you don't want that, right? You want them to build the unit, right? But if they are going to buy their way out, then they should pay the full cost of it, something that I don't think CIM did, right? And the reason being is because the city limited its analysis to the cost of building the unit, right? What's it going to cost us to build this unit, right? What they didn't take into consideration, and Bruce knows this because he was on the development side for years as well, that differential, the economic differential between an affordable unit and a market rate unit over the life cycle of that unit, that also needs to be taken into consideration and brought back in terms of present value. For example, if you can get $1,000 a month on a market rate unit and you can get $750 a month on an affordable unit, that $250 difference each month for 30 years, that's a benefit that in the CIM case didn't get taxed, right? Same is true when you sell it, right? When you sell it, that unit that rents for $1,000 is a lot more valuable than the unit that rents for $750. That wasn't taxed, right? So basically, the city left significant money on the table when it allowed CIM to buy its way out without the full measure of value, right? So you want to afford developers the flexibility to buy out. There may be business reasons for doing it, and that's okay, but you also want them to pay the fair cost, right?
Hear, hear.
Right.
You know, in our previous conversation, Sherman, you talked about unique ways of taxing. You had some
Yeah.
ideas, but also that you've, kind of the question I asked Catherine, other cities, how have they done it in your experience?
Yeah, so I've done this, I've done this work really all over. I've done it in Florida, Texas, California, Massachusetts, Maryland, Georgia, pretty much the same sort of thing, right? And in order for us to address the housing affordability in general and homelessness in particular, right? The sort of foundational element for this is you have to have an independent, dedicated source of revenue, right? Everything else really, guys, is just conversation, right? Because unless you have that dedicated revenue stream, you're begging for money, right, from somebody, right? And you're never going to really get there begging for money, right? So the thing that I think the starting place for it is, in my view, what I refer to as upzonings, right? So to give an example, when a developer comes to town and wants to tear down a 5-story building and put in its place a 50-story building, right? That increase in density increases the value of that lot. It goes from being worth X to 5 times X, right? But what you have to also think about is it also affects the value of the lot next door, right? That lot increases in value. And the one around the corner increases in value. And the one up the street increases in value. So every time you do a rezoning, right, that increases density, you're putting upward pressure on affordability. Land values go up, which makes it harder to build affordable housing, right? Because now you have to pay more for the land. So one of the things that the city ought to do, and a lot of other jurisdictions have done, Montgomery County started this 30 years ago, right, is you tax that density increase, right? And you put it directly back into an affordable housing pool. So think about this now, right? Think about had we done this in '96, right? And all the buildings that you see up and down Peachtree Street that were 10 stories that are now 40, right? That affects the price of housing in Vine City. It affects the price of housing in Southwest Atlanta, right? And I can tell you from having done this a number of years that even though we're a mature city in terms of development, we haven't come as far as how we got to go, right? Atlanta's going to be a boom town, right, for the next generation or two. Weather is an attraction. Think about it, right? Of all the places in America that you want to live, Atlanta is still probably the most affordable, right, as compared to Boston and Miami and Chicago and so forth. So the young people are going to keep coming here, and the companies are going to keep coming here, and the weather's going to continue to be nice, right? So we're really at the beginning of this thing, right? And so we need to not hesitate to do now what we should have done 30 years ago and tax these density increases that are going to be all over town. It would solve the problem because now we've got a dedicated source of revenue, right? We don't have to go begging. We don't have to go badge.
Good
rent,
news, Catherine.
right?
Huh?
Right? and that's how you do it. That's how you do it. So it's not. And the other thing that, now that I got the mic,
All right, I'm giving you 2 more minutes, and I'm going to ask Jason a question.
right? Let me finish by saying this. All right? We, in this conversation about affordability, right? We really need to start, just like we're talking about homelessness, we also need to start thinking about entry-level for-sale housing, right? We've gone 2 generations, and now about to go 3 generations with young people not being able to afford to buy homes, okay? Right? That's a serious problem, right? So, you know, people focus on, when they talk about affordability, they're always talking about rental properties, and that's cool, right? But people need to be able to graduate from renting to owning, right? That's core to who we are. And so we can do that, right? But from a policy perspective, we need to be talking about entry-level home ownership as well.
So, Jason, you guys know each other well?
Not at all.
Huh? All right.
We met in a lot, but we
All right, if nothing else happens, I'll buy lunch, let's get together, and I think there's ideas that we can share. I'm going to look to you for some of these ideas, Jason. What legislative measures are we talking about or actually proposing at City Council that would support sustainable funding? Sherman gave some ideas on that.
Yeah, and honestly, I would love to take some of those examples and make them into legislation and get that moving forward. I think that, to your point, we can't wait. You know, the best time to build affordable housing is yesterday, and the second best time is today. And so let's get it done. One program that I am interested in moving forward and currently trying to figure out how to put it into practice is something that actually came out of Tempe, Arizona. So in Arizona, municipalities are actually more restricted in terms of what they can do around affordable housing than we are here in Georgia. And so Tempe has a program called Hometown for All, which is and I know folks in the advocacy space might roll their eyes a little bit, but it's a voluntary program where developers pay into a affordable housing fund at the point in which they are applying for permits through the city. And so essentially it's a way for developers to show goodwill to the city and to communities and say, hey, we want to support this initiative. Please don't get mad at us and get and have torches and pitchforks. In the first year of them doing this voluntary program, they raised $6 million, and it's been roughly plus or minus $1 million of that every year since they've implemented it. And I think about how just a couple of years ago, I'm fighting tooth and nail to get an additional $3 million in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund here in the city of Atlanta. Let's don't leave any potential tools on the table. Let's implement what we can and try to get revenue from as many different sources as possible. I think about some of the development projects in the city that have had these huge political firestorms, whether it's Amsterdam Walk, whether it's even a project that I'm working with Atlanta Public Schools on in my district at one of their former school sites that has a little bit of neighborhood uproar. I think giving developers an opportunity to show that they have skin in the game outside of our requirements for inclusionary zoning, outside of the requirements that we have for some of the publicly owned land that we have when we're coming as development partners, I think allows us to generate additional revenues to support more housing opportunities. So that's something I'm working on. Separately, I do think it's important that we look at our existing inclusionary zoning legislation. I think broadening it beyond just the Beltline and some select communities is something we're going to have to lean forward in the saddle to ensure that we get stronger affordable housing outcomes.
And Jason, I interrupt here, and Sherman, I know we talked about this. What I hear from developers, I worked a lot with the apartment association, and what they told me is they don't have a problem with inclusionary zoning if that's what it is. We'll figure out a business model around it. It just needs to work for everybody. It comes back to predictability.
Right.
We're always kind of afraid to do it, but if we put it into practice, business people figure it out, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And also recognize this is the market today, the real estate market today is much tougher than it was maybe a couple years ago. Not only do you have market constraints, but you have these international challenges, these geopolitical challenges tied to high cost of labor due to immigration crackdowns. You have high interest rates due to all the craziness in D.C. You have tariffs, which is 50% today, is 10% tomorrow. We're talking about predictability. But I do think, so I recognize those challenges and those constraints. And so I do think the city should look at ways in which we can get more developments in the pipeline. By the tree protection ordinance is one aspect of that conversation, in trying to work with the development community to ensure that we don't stifle development. I think there's a lot of runway around parking minimums and removing parking minimums so developers have more control over their site so that they can build in a way that can get more units on a property without having the city get in the way of that decision. And there's things that we can do from a permitting standpoint that we started that I don't think we fully implemented in a way to scale to get more developments through the pipeline more quickly. And so there's some things legislatively that we're working on, but I think there's some administrative things that we can do to get more developments in the pipeline.
So, Catherine, do you and Jason get together every once in a while? Huh?
Mike, but Jason sees me a lot more than he would like to. Yes, we do. Councilmember Dozier's
Because
been-
my follow-up question is, how do you listen to community? I mean, if you go to a meeting, there's 75 mad people there, it's hard to listen because it gets emotional. But, Catherine would be somebody to listen to. She represents a lot of different interests.
So I'll say this, and Catherine last, because we do spend a lot of time together. I actually serve on the governing council for the Continuum Care, and a lot of our big moonshot projects that we've led on as a city have been in my district. The Melody is in my district. I've been so proud to be a part of that work with Catherine and team. And 405 Cooper in my neighborhood of Mechanicsville has been a bit of a political flashpoint. And
really,
the very first meeting that we did about 405 Cooper was so, there's so much anger and my neighbors were so incensed. It started triggering some fight or flight responses in me, in that space. But Catherine and team were phenomenal. And over the last year, we've had a number of community conversations, and we've worked out, I think, a path forward that not only is going to get 100 units of supportive housing built in a part of our neighborhood and close to downtown that honestly has not benefited anybody. There's been several homicides there, several assaults. We've cleaned that up, and we're going to build housing there. But in addition to that, we're bringing market rate housing into the community, townhomes, and then we've also activated some additional sites that the city currently controls that didn't involve having to do land swaps and things like that. So it's going to be an amazing project. I think that even though there's still some heartburn, I'm so proud that we've been able to work together to get it done. But also, I come to the premise of your question, Bill. I think a lot about how do we define community, because the people who are yelling at us in that room, it may have been 20 or 30 people, but it's a neighborhood of 5,000 residents. And I think a lot about who's at the table, who's in these conversations, who represents the quote unquote community, how I go on neighborhood nexus all the time. I can see demographic distribution of communities, and 90% of Mechanicsville are renters, and when you have a room full of homeowners that recently purchased to the community, I start to think about what can we do to ensure that the folks who aren't in the room or aren't at the table are going forward. And so from my office's standpoint, whenever, and I see I have a couple of District 4 folks in the room, we've done 9 town halls across the district. We do them hybrid. We go to MARTA stations, and we go to corner stores, and we talk about what's happening in the district and happening in the city to make sure that we bring more voices into these spaces, because we know that the people who attend neighborhood meetings, who attend NPU meetings, are people who have time in the evenings, who aren't at work, who have reliable childcare.
And if they have a sense of ownership, then they're advocates and own the team. Let me stop. We're about 5-7 minutes late on the schedule. I'm trying to keep, no, but I want to open it up to questions from the audience. So,
Eric Speakman, I really love the link between homelessness and affordable housing because it is so linked. And I unfortunately just got back from a COC, which I won't say, that the last 5 years was really working on that back end, right, the affordability. And that after all the budget cuts, and they were so frustrated in the lack of ability to make an influence on affordability that they've decided with the massive budget cuts and the end of stimulus money that they're actually going to the other.
then the question is,
They're putting more effort in the emergency housing. So I want to hear more of the link between, to keep the city from Atlanta going in that direction of not looking at the back, you know, that link between affordable housing and homelessness. So I've heard some suggestions. I'd like to hear anything else that you have to work on that link.
Yeah, I mean, these are really tough decisions that communities have to make. We just came back from Denver, and they invested, millions of their stimulus funds into purchasing 2 hotels. They're leasing a third, and they built additional non-congregate shelter. They made tremendous impact on the street. We're getting ready to see their data come out. We heard their shelter number went up pretty high. Their unsheltered number went down. So, communities have to make really hard decisions. Are we going to use finite resources to expand a temporary solution and manage people's homelessness, or are we going to use those solutions for permanent, and exit people out and provide the right supportive services to keep them out of homelessness? Or is there some happy medium? And I think that's how we are trying to approach it. We want to have a sufficient amount of low barrier shelter. For the folks that want to access it, they can, and they don't have to be the right shade of purple at the right day and time to access that, that shelter, just saying that it's accessible 24/7 and available and no barrier. But really, we want to make sure we have sufficient housing supply to exit people out of the traumatic experience of homelessness as quickly as possible.
we want to fully answer the questions, but keep it going.
Yeah, but see, this is also a resource question, right? So if you had a dedicated revenue stream that gave you predictable revenue year after year, you can plan, right? And so you don't have to make these tough choices, right?
If I could add one thing as well, this is as a reminder, the city of Atlanta is only 500,000 people. We're 8% of the metro population. The metro is over half of the population of the state of Georgia. And so making sure we're bringing more partners to the table across the region, across different county and municipal jurisdictions, getting the state more involved to help address those gaps, I think is a critical part of the conversation. A lot of this work rests on the shoulders of the city of Atlanta, but we're only a small part of the larger puzzle, and we need to make sure we're bringing all partners to the table to try to address those gaps.
That's why we call it a regional housing
exactly.
forum, right? Gary Cornell is listening in. Jason, I know you got to leave in about 10 minutes for another meeting. He's asking you how much of the revenues from the TADs in the city go to affordable housing investment.
That's a good question that I don't have a specific answer off the top of my head. I will say that we have, having sat on the Invest Atlanta board, I could tell you that whenever there's been a project that has taken TAD funding, there is a requirement that, as a matter of policy, to ensure that affordable housing is baked into that specific project. With that being said, it varies significantly from project to project. As an example, 2 Peachtree Street, which City and Invest Atlanta are partnering to build out right next to 5 Points MARTA Station, will have a significant amount of affordable housing. Don't quote me on a number of units. I think we're looking at around 600 units total of housing. But because the city is leaning, and it's a city-led project, there'll be a lot more affordable housing than, say, an Amsterdam Walk that is has an inducement from Invest Atlanta, is on the Beltline. It will probably have Beltline TAD money, but doesn't have as much of an affordable housing component as maybe some other projects. So it's very project to project.
Right. Question here.
feel like this just set up the question and was planned, but
And you are?
my name is Michael Lyons with City on Purpose and my investment firm, Weinbeck Ventures.
Close.
I was curious, you were talking about consistent revenue streams, having something like that, also supply. I'm curious, have you guys heard about the project over in Dallas, the Briscoe Apartments? It's a really unique project in which the municipality actually bought a fully leased up building. Because they didn't have to pay real estate or sales taxes, they could actually buy it for more than what a private buyer could actually offer. And by issuing tax-free bonds, they actually had no money out of pocket. So what this did for them was they had a consistent cash flow stream, and they gave up about $8 million of taxes for about a $15 million gain in appreciation that they could then capitalize later. And it also was guaranteed affordable housing because they could control it and put in rent stabilized housing. It was a really unique solution that they've done in a few other places, that it like works with the market versus against the market. Instead of like applying costs, it's like a revenue stream for the city while also providing. Is that something that the city organizations have looked into? And I realize that those types of solutions are maybe in the corner, so I want to bring that up and see how much
So
that
the
was
question
known.
is, are we familiar with that project or that kind of model? All
I'm
right.
not familiar with it. What we're doing with the Rapid Housing Initiative right now, though, is part of those units, we are acquiring multifamily developments. We're entering into a private enterprise agreement with AUD so that we can offset the taxes over time and not have that burden on us. But I would love to learn more about that specific project.
Right over here.
Thank you. Rob Johnson with Home for Everybody in the Cab. Catherine, in this planning for these major events coming up, didn't hear you mention, are we talking with the police, MARTA? How are they going to be kind of plugged into this? And the related topic is, from past major events in downtown Atlanta, often we in DeKalb County have found police and other people are essentially sending some of our homeless people on the street into other parts of the region. So how are you assuring that we are addressing this regionally?
Welcome to my world, Rob.
Yeah.
Not to be flippant about that, that is never our approach. When we reunify families or send them anywhere, our providers do a fantastic job of confirming there is a receiver on the other end. So that is a qualifier to get reunification assistance. That said, not saying that doesn't happen, but one of our key partners in this downtown rising work that our work plan includes is law enforcement. I neglected to share that earlier, but we've already met with the downtown law enforcement group that meets monthly. We've met with the downtown security group that meets monthly. Who knew that these groups even connect? And so these are all the different law enforcement entities that touch downtown, whether it's the sheriff, World Congress Center, APD, Georgia State Police, Georgia Tech Police. I had no idea there was all these many different polices downtown. And so, yes, they are an active part of the coordination for downtown, as is PAD, Policing Alternatives and Diversion. They've been an active participant in the planning and development to ensure that we're leading with services, but we are also going to have to mitigate and enforce closures. And so part of that includes being able to have a place to offer people who are newly homeless in real time, and saying, you can't sleep here, but we can take you to shelter today. There's going to have to be some sort of ongoing maintenance of that closure long term. So we are closely working with law enforcement. And APD has been an incredible partner to us all along. They are the first to come to the table to say being homeless is not a crime. And they also lead with that. And our Zone 5 downtown is the leader in utilization of the diversion center. So they're an active participant in the planning too.
You know how long this has been going on is we used to call that Greyhound therapy. I'm not sure Greyhound's still around anymore, but we're still moving people around that way. Allison from the Housing Justice League, since you have the mic. Many unhoused people access services downtown. What is the approach or plan that doesn't interrupt them accessing these services or being targeted for loitering? This is, when everybody's watching and we're trying to make things look good. How do we continue our services and not get people in trouble?
Yeah, all those services, downtown services will continue. None of that will be interrupted. In fact, we're adding additional services. We are in the middle of contracting 5 nonprofits to staff up 20 additional full-time outreach workers that will be branded, and you will hopefully be seeing them boots on the ground downtown every single day for hopefully what will be indefinitely, assuming we can raise that sustainable revenue. So we're going to be infusing downtown with even additional resources. I think some of the things that we're talking about are how do we do it better and more efficiently. When we closed or resolved the Pryor Street encampment recently, APD had a camera that was set up for 72 hours just at Pryor Street. And between Friday night and Sunday afternoon, there were 74 different groups, different vehicles that came to serve a meal just to the people in that one block. There was not enough people to ever consume that amount of food. And so I think we have to think holistically about how we approach this issue and also some of the unintended consequences of people that come to share food and resources and wind up just dumping their crap downtown and on the streets of our city. And that has an impact too. And not to mention the public health implications of that. Whether the food was, how it was prepared, and if it was food safe certified, and all of those things that factor into somebody who wants to do a good thing by serving a meal to somebody who might have had 5 meals that day already.
Yeah.
And so trying to think about how we coordinate all of this work collectively, but no services downtown are going away.
Okay. Hey, Jay, you might expect I'm going to ask you that question in a few minutes, so we'll get to that. I'm going to do one more question from the audience. We're running about 10 minutes late. Yes.
Okay, I'm Bam Taylor, native of Atlanta. I was here in the '96 Olympics, and also been an unhoused person for the last 5 years in Atlanta, living in my car under the bridges. And I do a lot of work with many of the service providers from Partners for Home and everybody else. My question is, who's doing accountability? Who's doing see all these services and all this money that's coming in and all these initiatives that's starting? I didn't have access to that, you know what I'm saying? So, and like I said, I do the work. And I work with many of these organizations, and they're like gatekeepers, and they maybe help certain kind of people, but I've been told that I don't look like I need help, or I just don't get the help, period. I don't even depend on that because God got me, so I ain't even tripping about that because I have a house now, and God did that too. But for 5 years, I was out here, and like I said, in '96, I watched people disappear, and I know that's why pretrial was built when ACDC was built, and that's a 1,500-bed facility. So I'm concerned if that's where people are going to go again, because we also rent out rooms to Fulton County in that jail also. So, and I know people are getting bussed out of town. Like, say, people get bussed from Atlanta because it happened during the Olympics, too. So I'm concerned about my people, the people out here, because I know there's a lot of conversation with our representation, so that's why I'm here. So I try to be in those rooms because a lot of decisions being made about us, and we're not getting asked because everybody think they know what we need, but we're
So
not
the
being
question
asked
is,
anything.
how do we not make
Yeah,
that mistake again?
Who's cleaning house?
Right.
I just want to know who's cleaning house. Like, who's holding people accountable when they say when all this money being allocated? Who's holding people accountable that is actually doing what it's supposed to? Because like I said, I wasn't a part of that, and with the people I work with every day, because I'm a street case manager, so I know people not getting what they need. So I want to know who's holding people accountable, because I can't do all that.
Good question.
I thank you for that. We would welcome you to the table and to join our planning and coordination work, first of all. We do have an active consumer advisory board who meets regularly and who is on our planning committees and work groups. And so we are every day trying to do a better job of incorporating input and guidance from people with lived experience. For all of our policies, in terms of accountability, before they get to our policy committee of the governing board, they actually have to go through our lived advisory board first for approval or not approval. And so that is how we are attempting to get better at ensuring that people with lived experience get to see the work first and are a part of the sausage making and then can hold us accountable. We would absolutely invite you. We're always recruiting more folks to that committee and to all of these work groups. The downtown planning group is open. And lastly, I would just say, you're right. We cannot assist everybody in our system today, and we have never had enough resources to be able to assist everybody in our system. And as a result, we are having to make ridiculous decisions every single day that our providers are faced with, do I serve this person or do I serve this person? Because there's not enough resource to serve everybody. And that, to what Sherman has shared, is, when we talk about having to beg for resources, I literally feel like my knees are bleeding every day because I am on my knees to all of these different, we're about to go to another meeting this afternoon with a commissioner to beg for more resources to be able to support the people that you are, working with every single day. And so until we can figure that out as a community and as a system and as a society, we're gonna continue to have to make those hard decisions about saying, you qualify, but you don't. You meet the mark and the eligibility criteria because we think you're the most vulnerable, and that's who we do try to prioritize, but you look like you got it figured out, and you're gonna have to figure it out on your own. And that, as a society, as a community, is essentially what we've decided.
And I'll just add that as a member of the Atlanta City Council, a big part of what we do is to ensure that that oversight and that accountability is happening. And it's important for us to hear from people like you who have these lived experiences, who are going through this day in and day out, who see the challenges, and because you talk to these people every single day. And I hear from Catherine all the time. We get regular reports. She presents to my committee. But y'all are the ones out in the street. Now, granted, she has team members that are out in the streets as well, but we need to hear from you as well. We don't know if something's wrong if we don't hear from you all that something's wrong. So I'll make sure you get my contact information. I want to make sure that anyone in this room, please reach out to me, my office, and to all of the members of Atlanta City Council so we can fully execute our oversight and accountability role to make sure that these services are being delivered, that this funding is going to where it needs to go. So I can ask Catherine the hard questions to make sure that we're executing as appropriately, but we need to hear from you as well. So I just want to add that too.
And this really does, and if there's a central theme to this conversation, Sherman made the point very well. We needed dedicated funding so we know what we have, so we can plan and be accountable to the community. Please thank Councilman Jason Dazer, Catherine Vessel from Partners for Home, and Sherman Golden from Thompson High. Thank you. Thanks once again. All right, I don't remember calling a break here, and we're 10 minutes behind. So everybody, please sit back down. I will have our contact information for all these folks on our website. For questions we couldn't answer, we'll try to get some answers. All right, folks, help me out. All right, for the next part of our program, we're calling this a fireside chat with no fire here. But we'll imagine the fire. I think, I've got 50 questions for each of you, and then we'll open it up. But a lot of material that's relevant to what we're going to talk about. So I want you to please welcome Dr. Jerry Parrish from the Metro Chamber of Commerce. Jerry, we're going by first names. and our friend A.J. Robertson from Central Atlanta Progress. And I know in our conversations before we got here today that most of the questions we just talked about are questions that we would ask the business community. So let's get going. Jerry, I don't think you've been here on a panel before. I've had AJ here a number of times, but I know in talking to Katie at the chamber, and she said Jerry's the person we need to talk to, that there's a commitment both by the chamber, it's one of your commitments around affordable housing, and certainly Central Atlanta Progress, that's central to their work every day and has people devoted to that. So, you guys got any question for me before I ask you a question? No? All right.
Just go easy on it.
Let's go easy.
Which I know you won't do, but go ahead.
AJ, I'll start with you. How is the business and civic community thinking about the need for a range of affordable housing options downtown? I know there's a vision. You've got a team working on it. Tell us about that.
Well, I think as the panel mentioned here, it really gets down to what kind of city we want and what kind of downtown we want. And our organizations, Central Atlanta Progress and the Downtown Improvement District, have for at least the last 25 years that I've been there, envision a city that has, particularly a downtown, that's more livable. And in order to be more livable, we need housing of all types. And as you know, we have the tremendous wealth gap in the city that runs from northwest to southeast. And downtown is actually in the lower part of that wealth gap. And we would welcome affordability at all levels. And we have affordability at all levels. But the reality is in the core of downtown, we just don't have a lot of housing itself. And there's lots of historic reasons for that. But we do have the potential, and it seems to be growing as the rest of our city is booming with density, that people will live downtown if we make our downtown community more livable. So to specifically to your answer your question, yes, we're on a mission, like many of you, that we like density, we like affordability. We have a very diverse population, and we recognize that. And we've got everything from homeless facilities to multifamily that's higher. We have very little, ownership of condos or housing. We just don't have the right land for that. But yeah, I would say we would share the vision of a very affordability at all levels.
So there's a reimagined downtown. Mm-hmm. Is that
we do that about
team
every
of folks?
year. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a team of folks that work on that?
Well, we have different. Everybody is using different ways to describe how downtown should be ready for World Cup and beyond. So that moniker has been, the chamber's using that. We're using it to some extent. We like kind of rediscover downtown because we've been reimagined at least 10 or 15 times in our past. So we think people just need to rediscover living downtown, and that would think. So yes, it's a current moniker that we're trying to get ready for World Cup.
I know we had some brief conversations about the possibility of conversion. Some of the office buildings that are there that maybe aren't being used or used in the same way. Is that part of the imagination?
Absolutely. And this is something I think that people need. We have a great opportunity that came out of, that's really a terrible opportunity at the same time. We have an endangered office market in downtown Atlanta. The pandemic had a tremendous effect on our community. That's one of the reasons why the tax base is low, particularly in downtown. I don't know about I can't speak for the whole city, because at the beginning of the pandemic, Our hotels were empty, so they went into Fulton County and argued for low basis. They came back, and now our offices are empty. So they're all arguing where our buildings aren't worth anything. In Fulton County, it's hard to really argue with them if you're an appraiser. So that's one of the reasons why our particular stock of business, of real estate, is a little bit low at the moment. So I think that the opportunity, some of our big buildings, the old buildings, are not coming back as office buildings. And we do have, the opportunity is to convert them and to have a large, as much as we could, portion of affordability in those buildings. But number one, it's very expensive. Number two, these buildings aren't necessarily suited as housing, so it's complicated. And number three, we have and someone mentioned it earlier, we have two things that are working against us. One is a higher interest rate environment and inflation. And our market is depressed. I'll give you an example. I'm down on Walton Street, Walton and Marietta, kind of in that area. I'm paying $18 a foot. That's pretty cheap. If you go maybe half a mile up to the stuff here, Spring and around Tech, $70 a foot. That's the difference in an office rate. Now, that building may be brand new, so okay, say $50 a foot. I mean, it's differential. And by the way, housing is not as big a gap, but there's still a gap between south of downtown and south versus here. So when the rates are that low, hard to justify new housing.
Yeah.
You can't make the numbers work, whether you're affordable or market rate. So this is a market challenge for us who want to build all kinds of housing, including affordable. It's just the market's just not very good right now, but it'll change and it'll get better. But just as we speak here, right here, it's a difficult time.
Yeah. You've got a 25-year perspective. Do you think we're making progress? I mean, are there conversations?
Well, actually,
new people at the table?
Your perspective is like 50 years, and mine's like 45. So I've been involved in downtown stuff for 45 years. I think we are definitely making progress, not on any metric you want to imagine. Now, we've had our ups and downs. We had a tornado in the middle of 2007. We've had a pandemic. We've had all kinds of public safety demonstrations that have gotten out of hand. We have all kinds of things that work against us. And so, but over time, I think, particularly speaking to housing people, looking back just on the last 10 years, and I give a lot of credit to you because you've been at it a long time, is the consciousness of people of affordability has risen to the top. I think I shared with you that we as business folks and civic folks every 4 years meet with all candidates that are running for city council or mayor's office in November. And we ask them lots of questions, but before we even ask them questions, we did a poll about what the voters are thinking about. And for the first time in my history of doing this work, public safety was not the number one thing. It's always been the number one thing in Atlanta on the minds of everyone. Doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in. It's still up there, but the three top things: affordability, homelessness, and transportation. And transportation is linked to affordability, as you know. So this is big news, and I give a lot of credit to all of you and everyone who's been advocating for affordability for a long time as being part of should be a major thrust of our city. And you've mentioned it. I think this mayor actually has been the best we've ever had and has done a number of things to raise the profile of this is something we need to do. As you know, you were at the beginning of, I think, Natalie's area of House ATL. I mean, that was has been a great addition to the whole cornucopia of organizations worried about affordability. So I do think we're making progress. It may not look like it every day as you walk down the street and worry about things, but I do think the consciousness of our community business, civic, residential has been raised.
And I think it's very significant that the community is saying that is the priority, because you've got to bring the community along, right? Jerry, you're the chief economist for the chamber. I know housing is one of your focus areas. I did say, well, there's no goals, Jerry. How do we know if we're making any progress? But one of the things that the chamber does is bring in new business. And as you said, one of the first questions they ask is, what's the housing situation? How do you answer that?
Well, the good news is Atlanta's pretty competitive with a lot of the cities that we work with. But, think about this. One of the things that, when we're bringing in those people, one of the big issues here is the valuation of those buildings and the tax revenues that it generates. It's our job. We are the economic development agency for the 29 counties of the whole MSA. Our job is to bring in more jobs, to help fill those office buildings, to bring the values back up, which will generate more tax revenue. But I should tell you a couple things about myself. First of all, unlike AJ and Bill and everybody else around here, I've been here less than a couple of years. So I'm still.
Well, I wasn't going to call you out on that,
yeah,
Jerry, but
I'm still learning. However, there is one thing. When I first moved here, I worked with a lady. I came from Florida, and she told me. She said, "Jerry," she says, "you need to move to Brookhaven." And so I did. I like her. I respected her. But then I saw what was happening in South Downtown and all this stuff. So I actually live downtown now. And I don't know how many of y'all, also live downtown, but I'm getting to watch this transformation, from the very front end of a lot of this. And we calculated it the other day, including the gulch and all the different things going on. There's about $8.7 billion either currently being spent or will be spent on this area. And certainly I'm an advocate of having more people downtown, more supply of housing downtown. I mean, hey, our chairman is a guy who is the CEO of some small little housing group called Pulte Homes. They're the third largest home builder in the entire country. So you bet we're much more focused on housing now. But, honestly, I'm still learning about housing and the situation up here in Atlanta.
Let me ask, this is really to both of you. How can the business community help expand affordable housing? I mean, the chamber is recruiting. People are asking, what is the housing? What's the situation with education? Those are the questions you have to answer. But what is the role of a chamber around affordable housing? Do you have a role?
Yeah, I think our role is, we want more housing.
Well, we all want that.
It's in all areas, but one of the things that you have to think about, our group has a policy team, and we work at the state level. A lot of these housing issues are handled locally. I was shocked at this when I first moved up there. There's 159 counties in Georgia, which is unbelievable to me. But there's also 535 municipalities, if I got my number right. And the majority of these issues like zoning and, all these things that really affect this the most, lot size, house size, parking, those kind of things, those are handled at the local level. That's actually not something that we can really do anything about. So I say it's everybody's job. We all want more housing. We have to work with the local governments. It's much more of a local issue than it is a state issue.
Well, so we often look to GMA, Georgia Municipal Association, working with cities, and ARC's working with counties. But are you at the table? Is the chamber at the table? CAP at the table with local communities? Because half the population is up here, right? One of the assets that we look to is that the governor's been very successful in bringing in business, very successful. Best state, right? We got EV and battery. They need 20,000 houses down in Brunswick. They need 7,000 or 8,000 over in Social Circle. Well, we're all connected in that way. So would the chamber share best practices? or is that GMA's job? I mean, you're working in our metro area, but that's half the population of Georgia.
You know, that's a great question. I'm not the person to answer that. I'm the economist. So what I can tell you...
Well, Katie sent you here, Jerry, so
what I can tell you is I've done a lot of work in housing in Florida before I got up here. I was the chief economist of the Florida Chamber Foundation, the chief economist of Florida Tax Watch, which was a kind of a watchdog organization. And a lot of stuff I did, I also taught at FSU for about a dozen years. A lot of stuff of what I did as a consultant was work with counties and talk to them about the economics of attainable workforce housing. And I literally could stay down there the rest of my life and gone from county to county, city to city, and done this the rest of my life. It's super complicated. You know, one of the things that you really get hit in the face with when you're trying to build attainable workforce housing is look at the impact fees. I mean, and they're different, depending on where you are in this region. And so I kind of see my job more as enlightening people on the issues, as far as my job at the Chamber. I will tell you we will be releasing a tool a little bit later that actually hits housing more directly, than I think we ever have before. I would love to give you a release date, but I can't get my web designers to tell me when this thing's going to be available. However, you'll see us more involved, but it's more of the education where people can see, hey, here's where we are, here's how our neighbors are over in the next county, and give them that information they need to work with the local governments, to help the supply of housing and work on more attainable workforce housing.
So I think, there's often headlines in the paper, we're the best state to do business. We're bringing all this business in, and then we don't see for the unhoused. And for those, there's 34 homes available for every 100 people looking for a home. We're 4 million homes short in this country. So it's not unique here. Have the same issue in Florida or any other place. And I'm sure, AJ, you have counterparts that are working in downtown business communities. So I guess what we would like to know is what role can each of us play? And the same question I asked the council member Dozier. How do we listen to the community? That's where the ideas are. It's where the money is. We've got to change consciousness that people are willing to pay for it. What's our role? The theme that we often kind of end up with is we all need to be at the table.
You're exactly right. I can't speak for the whole state, but I can speak for our little community. And part of what we constantly are doing are trying to figure out how do we attract capital into our community. And because for whatever reason it's difficult, there's lots of reasons why it's difficult on certain product types, we were the advocates for that created the East and West Side TADs, which led to the Atlantic Station TAD, which led to the Beltline TAD, because that was best practice and still is in the country of a way of redevelopment tools. We advocated even that 20% of our TAD on West Side TAD would be spent west of North Side Drive. So I'm on the board of the West Side Future Fund, and I can tell you those funds have been incredibly important to all that work that's going on the west side of North Side Drive. That tax base is coming from downtown property owners, not from, those are taxes that would have gone into the coffers of the county, the school system, and the city, but they're being spent on west of North Side Drive, which is great. So I think the real problem is we don't have a perfect tool, and someone's mentioned we need something that's themed affordability. The tools we have are really geared towards for-profit developers who build all kinds of housing, but we can't make it cheap enough. No matter, the incentive isn't great enough. So what happens is we have a lot of other tools like tax credits and things that nonprofit developers use, but we don't have enough scale in the nonprofit community to really make a huge, huge impact. So I would say to you, the thing we really need to do is to figure out a way to access private capital. That drives most of the housing into the affordable market. How do you do that? I think everybody in America would like to figure that out. But as a community here, we have to just be willing to do that. We sometimes we get afraid, we're just handouts to private developers. Well, if they're producing affordability, then we should do it, and we are doing it. But we need to do we need a better tool, I think. And someone mentioned an ongoing source. You and I have talked about public property land that folks, the city, the county, MARTA,
School board
has a tremendous amount of assets that are laying fallow. And, I would push it to the center of the table and say, come get it. Now, some of those assets may be shoring up the balance sheet of these municipalities so that their credit rating's good. I don't know. But it would seem like if it's laying fallow and we want to change our community, just come get it as long as you deal with affordability. But I don't know. That just seems, or sell it all and raise the money and then put that into affordability. There's a lot of it, but people tend to hold on to their public entities are no different than private entities. They tend to hold on to their assets.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before, and we'll continue to talk about public assets. Atlanta Housing, school board, city, thousands of acres. I guess the question is the chamber and Central Atlanta Progress and the community, the business community that you represent, are you willing to spend your social capital advocating for that? I think, for those of us, we go in and kind of by ourselves sometimes and say we'd like this or that. But when the chamber's at the table representing lots of businesses, could we use that capital to advocate? Because that's a huge resource. I mean, AJ, that probably is the best one we have.
We're advocating for it, so I can't speak for the chamber. They have to.
Well, Jerry, another question.
Jerry, just say yes, man. I'll cover you with cake.
In Florida, does the business community advocate for that?
They do. They advocate for attainable workforce housing because one of the things in some of the studies I've done and all that stuff, what really drives economic impact is if you give somebody, get somebody a place to live, we're talking about market rate or not, and they actually accept one of those open jobs in there, you get this double economic impact. And so what we saw in Florida was, and there's an article in, I think it's Wall Street Journal this morning, about Disney building attainable workforce housing for the people that work there. And we've seen that with companies out there a lot. Because remember, turnover is extremely expensive. And a lot of these really smart companies have figured out, hey, we can build some housing and, give it a little subsidy or, even sell it at market rates to their own employees. The trick is, though, with all this attainable, housing is, how do you keep people from flipping it at market rate? You sell them a house at a low rate, and then if you don't restrict them from selling it, they can make a ton of money just flipping it out on the market. And that's where we see the land trust and, all these different kind of solutions. That is a big, big deal. That's the big issue. And right now, you want to try to build some attainable workforce housing. Well, the tariff on steel and aluminum is now 50%. What's the lumber price? What's the price of labor? All that stuff. It's just not going to happen right now. You have to think about this. It has to be, you have to at least cover your cost if you're a builder, and they have to be able to make a profit. It's very difficult. Tax abatements are great. The state can pitch in with the low-income housing trust and those kind of, subsidies in there, but it is a difficult thing. If builders can't see clear to make money doing this, they're not going to do it, and I think that's where we are right now.
I'm going to open it up just a moment. Let me ask one more loaded question for you guys. Let's imagine in a few years that Centennial Yards is built out. It might be quite a few years, but big project. It's going to change the face of downtown. That South Downtown is thriving, probably where you live, Jerry, and there's a vision for that. That the Stitch is completed, which gives us, I don't know, 30 acres of park?
14.
14 acres of park, but it connects neighborhoods. I was going to call it 30, AJ. So.
Well, it's 30 catchment area.
Okay. All this will generate economic development, right? It's good for businesses downtown. People want to live here. Issue that we can see coming, and just very much like in the Beltline, had a vision for the Beltline, but before we could buy the land, it got bought up. So there's nothing on the Beltline affordable. Now they're reaching their goals of how many units. The same thing can happen here, right? How do we prevent that? Because it's kind of like a slow train coming. You can see it coming. You know what's going to happen. Is there any conversation about that?
Well, I can't speak for the chamber, but
oh, go ahead.
But I can say in our case, let's just take the Stitch out here. So we've identified every property owner within a half a mile here. Everyone knows that we want affordability. So this fabulous church owns acres over here. I'm pretty sure that the church is going to do the right thing. The Civic Center project already has an affordability component built into their deal, if they can ever, from a market standpoint, get it going. On the other side, we have Truist, who is in the affordable financing business. So we've talked to every property owner immediately here. So I'm pretty sure that at least in the case of this part of downtown, and part of what our grant money says is that we are going to do affordability. Now, I don't know if we can do it at the scale and it's all affordable and everything, but our goal is 30%. And we want to add at least 3,000 affordable units just in this neighborhood of about a half mile. So we do have a goal, and we're going to hold ourselves. We'll try to hold ourselves to the goal. Now, having said that, our organizations, we don't own anything, we don't make anything, but we are trying to be what the Beltline tried to do in the beginning. We're going to try to do it from the outset in terms of with the city, in terms of trying to hit those things. I think these other projects are already in private hands. We've already discussed the CIM deal. The CIM deal, we can debate, was it good, was it bad? I can tell you, overall, it was a piece of property that laid fallow for 130 years, and nobody wanted to live above a train track. So and it was a big hole in our community. So the fact that we're getting some money from them, and I do think they got 50 acres of land, there will be an affordable component somewhere in there. Now, maybe not to the extent that they could buy themselves out, and they can do that on some of their properties. So I'm still pretty convinced that housing, the momentum we have, that we'll get some affordability. South Downtown is a little bit different. I think they will build some affordability. I think the owners there do see how the city's moving, the enthusiasm people have, the importance of having a diverse neighborhood. They're dealing with buildings that have laid fallow for even 100 years. So I think we got to, I'm not defending these guys, but I do think we got to give them a chance to get something up and running in areas of town that have seen nothing. I mean, there's been nothing in South Downtown and things. I mean, we got the jail, we got the Greyhound station, and we got the police department. nobody really wants to snuggle up there and live right there. So we got to give these guys a little bit of time to, to get things rolling. But I'm optimistic that we'll look back, like you said, and say, because of what the work we've done prior, that people may not have a legal commitment, but I do think we have a community commitment to try to be an affordable downtown.
Okay. Let me open it up for questions. There's one here, one over here. Yes.
I'm Adelaide Steedley with the Atlanta Housing Authority. Thank you very much for this great conversation, Bill. One of the things we're also looking at is how to raise money for affordable housing, particularly outside the region. There's so much competition locally.
And you are a member of St. Luke's.
And I'm a member of St. Luke's. Thank you very much. So we're looking at, and one of the ways to make capital available is to lower the risk or lower the perceived risk, and that's loan loss guarantees and loan reserves. Government organizations like ours can't put money aside and hold it. That's not the way that the funds have been given to us. What kind of tools or mechanisms, is there a conversation about setting up funds? Maybe folks in this room have access to those types of tools that can bring interest rates down and entice new money to Atlanta. Thank you. To the region.
Yes. Yes.
You stumped the panel.
I think you're talking about like a financial institution type of lowering risk, or
private equity. We're just bringing, if all this growth is coming and all these businesses are coming, and the governor and other folks are being so attentive to bringing. I mean, we're the third or fourth highest national headquarters city in the country. And so if all of that capital is willing to come take a chance with the Atlanta market, we're trying to figure, in other cities, they will bring those companies into the fold and say, and this is what we do for affordable housing, and can have patient capital sitting or loan loss reserves, or to sort of marginalize that risk to bring those costs that we're all quite familiar with in terms of and just lower the barrier to entry into the market.
Okay, I think the young lady had a question, but she just left. So just come over here. Okay. Ready.
Good morning. Joyce Broadwater with Home Smart Realty. Keep hearing affordability, affordability. I wanted to ask Mr. Golder before he left, but what entry point, price-wise, do you see as affordability, especially in today's market? Because the numbers I'm seeing are not really affordable when you look at the salaries of the people.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I think they need to come below 300,000. But it's starting at 3, jumping to 4 and 5. I'm like, who the heck are these people?
Yeah.
So I don't know what y'all think. Is that
well, I don't have a bias, but I'm just follow what ARC. There's somebody here from ARC puts out about 80% of AMI or whatever. Should it be 60%? Should it be 50%? I don't know. I really don't know. But the official statistics really come out, I think, from ARC.
Because what you're having is a lot of people, you got multi-generational families. I'm sorry. What you see is multi-family, generational families moving to afford one house.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good.
That's not good.
You're setting yourself up for 2008.
Hi, my name is Michael Collins, and I work for Colour of Change. We are an organisation that focuses on racial justice issues, and we're part of a coalition that is trying to end jail deaths in Fulton County. I was a little bit late to this session because I was over at the Board of Commissioners talking about jail deaths, and I wanted to get your opinion on the World Cup, and I apologise if this has already been covered, but there is a plan called Downtown Rising that's been produced by ADID and Partners for Home to eradicate homelessness from the downtown area. And I just wanted your opinion on why you think is a good idea, or if you think is a good idea for a business organisation to be driving the city's strategy on homelessness when they obviously have vested interests around the World Cup? And why has there been no input from the public on this plan?
Were you here for the first session? I was not. No. Okay, so we covered a lot of that material, but you guys want to make any comments?
Well, first of all, perhaps I would use a little bit different language than eradicate homelessness. We have the largest concentration of homeless service providers in the entire Southeast, located within a half a mile of here. We are not getting out of the homeless business no matter what we're going to do. We have the most robust housing program of anywhere in the Southeast. What we're trying to do, and I wouldn't even use the World Cup as a measure. I think Catherine mentioned that. We're just trying to provide services for the homeless folks that we have. We have too many people living on the street. We have too many encampments. We need to either find them a home, find them a shelter, take care of them some way. That's our motive as a business community. We're not trying to eradicate anything. I don't know where I wouldn't support that type of whatever position somebody has given you.
Hi. Wow, I am Tupac today. Okay.
And you are?
Yeah, hi, my name is Anjali. I am a dual purpose person for being here. First of all, before I get started, is there any chance that I could get like everybody who has business cards, like ways to make connections or emails, phone numbers, stuff like that?
Well, you do that after the meeting, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I did that. Okay, and I started in a nonprofit organization, or at least the concept of it, in 2017. It's called Ujima, One Love, One Heart. The goal of it is to have arts and culture meet problem solving kind of thing. So that's part of the reason why I'm here. I do need some board members, so that would help. But the reason why I'm standing is because I want to sit. Is because I want to ask some maybe simple sounding questions.
Well, you get one question, and I'm going to call on some more folks.
Get some answers that make sense. So first of all, I'm wondering if there's any point in this existence where there's been some consideration for solving like the obvious outline problems, like putting porta potties or some kind of restroom situation out on the streets, so that little problems like whether people pee or poop or whatever on the street because they have nowhere else to go during certain hours of the night get remedied. That's very important. I feel like some of these things are little small common sense kind of problems that can be resolved. Or like anywhere there's a sidewalk, or anywhere there's a road, making sure there's a sidewalk to be put there so that people can, that's a part of the public safety.
All right, let me address that. That's a basic service. It's been a long-term conversation.
Okay.
We have put some restrooms in. That's been a tough one. AJ?
Yeah, so. My
okay,
last question.
You only get one question.
But it's part of it too, kind of. Or repurposing some of the locales that are already like in existence to accommodate like something closer to no personal investment, kind of like public housing situations from the buildings that are already like in existence and are, like run down, those type of things.
Okay.
Well, let me address the restroom game. I mean, Bill, you remember this. We had a 25 years ago, 20 years ago,
Shirley
there was
Franklin.
a Blue Ribbon Commission that some of us served on, and one of the things was to create public restrooms. We did. We had created 4. And we tried to create more, but one of the problems was finding the right property where a restroom would work and someone would take care of it and clean it and so forth. We have one in Woodruff Park. There's one in Piedmont Park. There's one over on, I think on Edgewood at the fire station, used to be, and there's one at City Hall. We, in the last year, have been talking to Catherine and the city about having more restrooms. But if you're going to do, the restrooms are expensive, and the city, frankly, doesn't have a great track record of maintaining anything, but particularly restrooms. So this is again, you have to have the will, you have to have the fortitude, the commitment. The city, no one wants to get into the public restroom business in the private sector. This has got to be a city or county function. So I do think there's cities across the country that have beautiful public restrooms, but they care enough to do that. I do think we're on the cusp, hopefully, of adding some more. So I think there is some hope. But even the ones we have now need replacing. They're in pretty bad shape. So that is something that I think is necessary as we get more people living in particular areas.
And it's, you know, one of the leverage points is when you're going to have 1 million people in here, they're going to, we all need it every day, but when we have visitors, it becomes, Jerry, I know you need to leave at 9:30, and that's what we negotiated on. I think we can try to get a couple more questions in. Here's my short question, and one back here.
Hi, my question is for AJ. I'm with Natson Hotel Group, Lance Robertson, Director of Government Relations. I attended a meeting here about the Stitch, and I was pleasantly surprised in the initiative you guys are doing in reference to Buttermilk Bottom to identify the legacy residents to attach some type of affordable housing. Jack Saby led the initiative here. Can you elaborate on that in reference to Buttermilk Bottom and the legacy initiative?
Right. Well, one of the reasons we want to do the Stitch, one of the primary reasons is when the highway came through Atlanta in the 50s, it divided downtown, divided Midtown, but downtown particularly from poor African-American neighborhoods. Buttermilk Bottoms is one, Auburn Avenue is another. If you just went around the Grady curve, you got down to I-20, there were others. Part of what we want to do was this stitch the community back together. The highway, no one wants to live right next to the highway. At least they haven't. There's some big buildings now in Midtown that are, you can't hear the highway because they're so far up. But we down in this area, we got a lot of land that we could do and try to reconnect to the Buttermilk Bottoms history, tell that story. Part of what we're trying to do is just tell that story, because if you didn't live here in the 50s and 60s, you didn't know anything about it. The community has vanished. So that is one of the motivations for wanting to build a green space and build housing here and create a new community.
One more question in the back.
Hi, my name is Kamaria Beeman. I'm here as a social worker and as a concerned citizen. So I noticed there was a lot of talk about bringing capital to the city, and Atlanta. I'm not born and raised here, but I grew up here, and there's a real pattern. It's been starting, but I've noticed there's a real pattern with Atlanta when big international events come here. All of a sudden, things that are local are considered an embarrassment or something that's going to detract people from participating. I've noticed that a lot of the businesses that have come here are national businesses or very large companies that aren't from here. Is there anything that you're looking at focusing on local businesses, particularly Black business owners and LGBTQ business owners, both of which are a sizable community in Atlanta who have ideas, who are unable to get funding for their businesses that could in turn, one, have you hire people who are without a job and generate funding versus large companies like Microsoft, Google, that have largely imported people from other states to work there and driven housing prices up?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a brand new program the mayor started called Showcase, and it is geared towards small business. all small business. I don't think it's black, white, any kind of small business, so that those businesses try to get a piece of this economic pie. I would tell you how to get in touch with them, but I think you can just Google Showcase Atlanta maybe, and you can find the information on the program. But it's exactly what you just mentioned. And it's not just we really haven't had that many international events. We've had the Olympics, and we've had a Super Bowl, and we've had this. We have hundreds of events, though. Hundreds of events. There's a big convention in town right now that any kind of small business, it shouldn't be looking at the international ones. So I would encourage you to take advantage of what the city's trying to do with Showcase.
We're going to finish up. Jerry, I know you told me before you got here and you leave it now. Any last comments? Anything that I didn't ask or things you want to share? Jerry, this is how we do it up here in Atlanta. We put you on the hot seat. We can learn coming from Florida.
Let me just say, I'm at a stage in my life where I didn't need a job. I didn't want to move, but I got this opportunity. I had a headhunter call me and say, hey, I've got a great job open. Would you be interested? And honestly, just to be blunt, I said, well, where is it? And he said, Atlanta. And I said, I don't know about that. And he promised me if I came up here and met the people that I worked with, met the community members, and saw what all was happening up here, that I would, at my age, advanced, I will tell you, I would pick up and leave my home and move to Atlanta. And I've done it. And I moved downtown. I live in a building that has 70, affordable, housing units in it. And I'm jumping in with both feet. So I don't know everything. I don't know, what all I can do to help. But certainly, I'm working on that right now, and I'm glad to be here. There's a lot of positive stuff happening in this town. We should all be proud that, we've got some issues, but a lot of the issues is because of our success. Yes, it does drive up housing prices. Yes, it does. But because of the jobs that are being created, certainly that brings opportunity as well.
Thank you for making the move. Might have been a courageous move at this stage, but we're happy you're here. AJ?
I don't have any comments except one. This guy really has put housing on things. So you can just give him a big round of applause. And I say this not only because he's a good friend, but he really has devoted his life not only to this subject, to the many subjects. And without Bill Bolding's leadership, commitment, determination to push something, it just wouldn't get done. So give him another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Please thank Dr. Jerry Parrish and A.J. Robertson from CAP. All right, I hadn't broke yet. Sit down. I'd like to give a few comments like any Baptist minister does. This is what you heard. Thank you, AJ. We might say that we live in unprecedented times. That is true. But we've been here before. We know there's going to be cuts. We've already know that. Catherine's dealing with it with the homeless. We're dealing with it, affordable housing. Even the practice of holding people accountable, that money has been cut. We have failed to convince the community, and this is on us. We've failed to convince the community and many of our political leaders the value of creating and supporting affordable housing as a way to create sustainable communities and address issues that everyone supports. Safety, public health, education, thriving communities. Without housing and affordable housing, we're not going to make progress on those issues. So there always needs to be a connection. Just as we talked about transportation, occasionally we've had Marta here to talk about that connection. We live in a time of anger, fear, and sometimes violence, particularly around the other, whether it's religious, class, race, religion, or geography. This is often expressed in NIMBY. Okay? This is one of the things as we look around the region, we've got to convince people that mixed income, we've been doing mixed income housing certainly back from the 90s and still hadn't convinced people. We can look to it and say it's very successful. People do like to live together. Jerry lives in one of those places, but we failed to convince the community of the value of that. We're all scrambling to make sense of it all. But in response, we need to work from our assets. This is not the first time we face these challenges, and it won't be the last. When we think of the history of this country around Reconstruction, segregation, unpopular wars, civil rights, assassinations, violence, attacks on Jews and Muslims and Christians, and we certainly have had cuts in funding over the years as the violence increased. So when we think about the assets that we're going to work from, we have excellent leaders and leadership in the region. That's you. That's us. That's some of the folks in the business community and the faith community. Just look around the room. We are those leaders. We have a strong advocate in the mayor of Atlanta. We heard from Atlanta Regional Commission at our last meeting that they, for the first time, are leaning into affordable housing because all 11 counties are asking ARC for help. Atlanta Housing has excellent leadership, and they're beginning to really make moves in the social sector. And we recently had Terry Lee here to talk about their aspirations. It's a new day. We are beginning to have housing forums in the region. We have 3 different forums, and we talked about it at the last housing forum. Those are local conversations. Now, we can have a regional conversation here, but it's eventually got to be local. So we have that in Gwinnett and DeKalb and Cobb County. And I'm in full support. We need those in every county. We have House ATL, and you made an announcement about being in Marl. You started in Atlanta, but you're branching out. So it's always got to be regional. We have a strong advocacy community. And we have facilitating groups like House ATL that's based in the Community Foundation. And that's significant. Community Foundation has been around for 60 years. So having it based in an institution like that says it'll be sustainable. We have now the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Atlanta Civic Circle, and other news organizations that are courageously leaning in to research and greater coverage. That's new for us. And you remember AJC spent a whole year talking about investors coming into our community and buying up 30% of the houses in our region. And now we read, City Council and some other regions are saying you're going to have a manager in the state somewhere, right? So we're beginning to have that conversation. The state, as well as the chamber, needs housing for new business and is hearing from communities around the state. We need to take that as an asset. If the governor and the legislature needs this done, it's not just out in the state, it's all over the state. Some of us get caught up in believing so much is wrong that there's no way we can ever make a difference. So we become paralyzed and don't do anything. I have days like that. It's just like, my God, what do we do? Others of us go in the opposite direction and try to take too much on. Thomas Merton, the great theologian, said, "To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, is to succumb to violence. The frenzy of the activist kills the root of inner wisdom that makes work fruitful." I'm talking here about taking care of ourselves. We don't get to choose how we get a life. We don't get to choose whether we're victims or not, but we do get to choose whether we live in victimhood. So I want to encourage each of you to greater collaboration, to be open to new ideas, to create coalitions. Just as the U.S. Housing Investment Group has done. They just had a meeting in Washington, D.C. For the first time, we've got mayors, CEOs, and advocates at the same table in Washington saying, we need to do something, Congress. Talk to others that don't agree with you. There's a sense to kind of get in our bubble and just be with people that we agree with. We need to get out of that bubble. Listen to more and different points of view. Talk with less certainty. Build trust. Create safe places for dialogue. This is one of those places. And I say that there's 3 other places in the region. We need many of those right now. Take better care of ourselves and each other. I can tell you as one who's had health challenges this year, health is everything. And the fact that folks start taking care of each other or checking in with each other, not just around health challenges, just how your work's going. How are you sustaining? How's your families? My experience is that people are hungry for this. Hating on each other is not life-giving. Fear of others and the unknown only generates more fear. People want answers to hard-to-solve questions. It is incumbent on our political, business, faith, and social sector to tell the truth about what we know is true. To tell the truth what we know is true. How many meetings have you been at that we know, but, well, we can't say that? We got to say that. We only thrive together. I think people want greater harmony, safety, and to know we are going to collectively be all right. And we can only do that together. So we'll continue this conversation. We'll encourage others. Take care of yourself and take care of your friends in this work. Amen. Thanks for being here.